Chapter 13. Social Behavior. Social behavior evolves when cooperation among conspecifics produces, on average, higher rates of survival and reproduction than solitary individuals can achieve. The word cooperation typically refers to an outcome in which two or more interacting individuals each receives a net benefit from their joint actions, despite the costs they may have to pay for undertaking such actions. In many cases, cooperation entails a fitness cost to the individual performing the behavior. This is known as altruism. These costs can include the time and energy associated with the behavior, the inability to perform other fitness-enhancing behaviors such as feeding, and possible increased predation risk. Cooperative behavior is only expected to evolve when, on average, the benefits to the actor exceed the costs. In case of negative social interaction such as spite, deceit and manipulation, there is loss in inclusive fitness and incurs cost to both the actor and the recipient, thus such interaction are rare. Although genetic relatedness the strong role that plays in promoting pro-social behavior, but animals that are not genetic relatives, however, cooperate with each other in many contexts. For example, female elephants help raise the offspring of others in their group, protect their calves and the calves of others from predators, and even push other elephants out of the path of danger. And perhaps most remarkably, female elephants know when providing assistance to another member of their group would be non-profitable. The important social cooperation among animals are 13.1 Group selection. Flocks of birds, schools of fish, swarms of insects, and herds of mammals are examples of social group sets of individuals that remain in close proximity and interact with one another. Across species, there is tremendous variation in the size, composition, and persistence of social groups, their degree of sociality. Group composition can differ with respect to sex and age. The time that individuals spend in groups can vary seasonally or daily. Groups can differ in the relatedness of their members. Many groups, especially large ones, are composed of unrelated individuals. In contrast, smaller family groups are composed of closely related individuals, often containing siblings of different ages or individuals spanning more than 2 generations. Group selection describes natural selection operating between groups of organisms, rather than between individuals. This would produce adaptations that benefit the group, rather than the individual. Group selection can evolve only if it results in an individual in a group obtaining higher fitness than it would by living alone. In other words, the net benefits of group living for an individual must be greater than the net costs. V. C. Wynne Edwards, 1962, in his book Animal Dispersion in Relation Leg Social Behavior, first time mentioned that animals can regulate their own population density through groupeter selection. For example, under crowded conditions, many birds cease reproducing, so that food may be available for already born birds. The interpretation of this phenomenon was that these birds were being altruistic. Their failure to breed was for the ultimate good of the species. Altruism is the behavior which must reduce a donor's fitness relative to a selfish alternative, and the fitness of the recipient must be elevated relative to non-recipients. According to Wynne Edwards, groups that had altruistic behavior would have a survival advantage over groups that did not. Bro. Natural selection can operate at 2 levels, within group selection and between group selection. Within group selection acts against cooperators and altruists, because member of group who do not cooperate, selfish type, pay some cost that others do not. Selfish types are always favored by within group selection, since they receive any benefits that is obtained because of the actions of cooperators and altruists, but they pay none of the costs. Between group selection favors cooperation when groups with more cooperators outproduce other groups. For example, by helping each other, group has more chance to tackle large-size prey. 13.1.1 Benefits and cost of group living. Benefits and cost of group living are shown Table 17. Benefits can include reduced search time to find resources, food or mates, increased feeding success, enhanced resource defense, reduced predation risk, lower physiological costs of thermoregulation and movement, division of labor, and communal care of young. For example, by hunting in groups, our ancestors were able to kill large mammals they could not have subdued as individual hunters. These social humans could also defend their prey and themselves from other carnivores, and could tell one another about, for example, the locations of food and predators. Costs associated with group living can involve increased aggression and competition for resources, predator attraction, disease transmission, and, in some species, infanticide and cannibalism. Table 17, The benefits and costs of group living. Benefits. Aggregative response to prey density means that groups indicate rich sources of food. Individual risk of predation diluted by joining a group. Groups can tackle larger prey than single individuals. Huddling in groups helps thermoregulation. Energetic advantages to swimming or flying in a group through slipstreaming. Cost, greater interference from competitors. Greater risk of contracting disease. Greater chance of being cuckolded, or mistakenly feeding someone else's offspring. Investment in foraging, courtship, or other activities exploited by other group members. Young may be cannibalized by neighbors. Greater risk of inbreeding. Example 1, many small birds forage in flocks. To test whether flocking provides protection against predators, an investigator released a trained goshawk near wood pigeons in England. The hawk was most successful when it attacked solitary pigeons. Its success in capturing a pigeon decreased as the number of pigeons in the flock increased. The larger the flock of pigeons, the sooner some individual in the flock spotted the hawk and flew away. This escape behavior stimulated other individuals in the flock to take flight as well. But foraging in a flock also imposes a cost. The pigeons in a flock interfere with one another's ability to find seeds. Figure 117. Figure 117, Flocking behavior of pigeons. Example 2, the benefit of group living was seen in the common minnow, Phoxinus phoxinus, a small fish found throughout Europe in freshwater streams and rivers. Individuals in groups can find food patches faster because more individuals engage in searching. Once hidden food is found, all group members can move to the patch to feed. Experimentally it was observed that as group size of common minnow increases, the search time for an individual to find hidden food will decrease. Example 3, many large birds such as geese, cranes, white pelicans fly in a V formation, with fairly uniform spacing between individuals. There is the aerodynamic advantage of moving within a group. Birds flying in a V formation had a lower wingbeat frequency and heart rate than birds flying alone, probably because they were flying in the wake of another bird. Example 4, cooperative colony foundation has been especially well studied in the desert seed harvester ant Messer purgandii. In terms of between-group selection, in many populations of M. purgandii, adult ants are very territorial, and brood raiding, in which brood captured by ants from nearby colonies are raised within the victorious nests, and colonies that lose their brood in such interactions die is seen among young starting colonies in the laboratory. Within groups, all co-founding queens in a nest assist in excavating their living quarters, and each produces approximately the same number of offspring, so there is a positive correlation between the number of cooperating foundresses in a nest and the number of initial workers, brood raiders, produced by that colony. Nests with more workers, that is, those with more cooperating foundresses, are more likely to win brood raids. Until workers emerge, queens within a nest do not fight, and no dominance hierarchy exists, figure 118. After workers emerge and the between-group benefits of having multiple foundresses are already set in place with the presence of brood raiders, all that remains is within-group selection, which favors being non-cooperative. It is at this juncture that queens within a nest often fight to the death, figure 118, from cooperation to aggression. The scenario depicted above is ideal for studying group selection models of cooperation, as group selection requires the differential productivity of groups based on some trait. In the case of M. purgandii, the trait is queen-queen cooperation. Such cooperation is selected against within groups because cooperators pay a cost not borne by non-cooperators. At the same time, cooperation may be selected for between groups, because groups with many cooperators differentially survive brood rating, the between-group component of group selection. 13.1.2 Social dominance. Many social groups are characterized by sustained aggressive/submissive competitive relationships between individuals. Individuals of group often in their competitive abilities based on age, size, or condition, and so some individuals will be better competitors than others. In general, more competitive individuals will have greater access to limited resources than will weaker rivals, resulting in greater net benefits of group membership. Engaging in aggressive interactions over resources runs the risk of injury for both parties involved, a substantial cost of sociality. In most groups, repeated encounters between two individuals usually end in the same result: the better competitor wins the interaction. Individuals can often be ranked according to their tendency to win or lose against each of the others in the group. Such rank orders are referred to as social or dominance hierarchies. Dominance hierarchy is an organized social system with dominant and subordinate members. Within a linear dominance hierarchy, an alpha individual is dominant to all the others in the group, a beta individual is dominant to all but the alpha, and so on down to the lowest ranker who is dominant to no one, though there are often triangular relationships, e.g. A beats B, B beats C, but C beats A, that disrupt the linearity, transitivity, of the hierarchy. Example: dominance hierarchies in crayfish. Crayfish are small freshwater sedentary, stream bottoms, crustaceans that feed on a wide variety of foods, including living and dead animals and plants. When aggregated in high densities, they often fight over resources and form dominance hierarchies. In contests over resources, crayfish exhibit both aggressive and submissive behaviors. Aggressive behaviors include approach, in which crayfish move toward an opponent, threat display, in which they spread their claws, and attack, in which they move quickly toward an opponent with claws open. Submissive behaviors include retreat and escape. A retreating individual moves slowly away, whereas an escaping individual makes a rapid movement away from an opponent. In crayfish, a top-ranked alpha individual that possessed the highest dominance index, a second-ranked beetle individual, and a third-ranked gamma individual that possessed the lowest dominance index. Dominance hierarchy decreases aggression up to 80% in the experiment. Dominance rank strongly affected access to the food. Individuals with higher ranks spent more time in contact with the food than did lower-ranked individuals. Aggressive interactions are a source of stress, and glucocorticoids are hormones that are secreted by the adrenal gland in vertebrates in response to stressful situations. Chronic stress is associated with altered immune system function and reduced reproduction, and thus negatively impacts fitness. If dominance hierarchies function to reduce aggression within groups, they should also lessen stress. Conversely, any disruption in the dominance hierarchy could result in increased stress levels. Example: researcher investigated whether an unstable dominance hierarchy could result in increased stress in chacma baboons, Papio hamadryas ursinus. Baboon males form a strict linear dominance hierarchy in which alpha males have sole access to fertile females. However, this population also lives near other groups, which allows males to easily move between groups, and so changes in rank are common, with the identity of the alpha male changing, on average, about every 6 months. The researchers divided the study into time periods in which the dominance hierarchy was either stable, times with no change in alpha or beta males, or unstable, times during which the alpha or beta male changed. It was observed that instability strongly increased aggression among males, whereas aggression remained below. Fecal glucocorticoid levels varied with dominance stability, just as predicted. Stress hormone levels were lowest during stable periods but were significantly higher during each period of instability. The increase in glucocorticoid levels during periods of instability occurred in both high and low-ranking males. Therefore, the stable dominance hierarchy has important fitness consequences for all males in the group. 13.2 Kin selection. W. D. Hamilton, 1964, developed concepts that explained altruistic acts without resorting to group selection. Starting with the known fact that relatives have alleles in common, Hamilton suggested that natural selection would favor an allele that promoted altruistic behavior toward relatives because the result might be an increase in copies of that allele in the next generation. 13.2.1 Hamilton's rule. Hamilton worked through several examples, and eventually realized that the number that kept falling out of his calculations was Sewall-Wright's coefficient of relationship. Hamilton proposed that for altruism to evolve, the additional fitness benefits, B, obtained by the recipient must be greater than the fitness cost, C, to the actor, adjusted for the degree of relatedness, R, between the two individuals, Table 18. The degree, or coefficient, of relatedness is the probability that two individuals have inherited the same allele at a particular locus from a common ancestor. Hamilton formalized this relationship in an inequality that is now known as Hamilton's rule. Altruism can evolve when Rx be greater than C. RBC /. It is the first formal quantitative treatment of kin selection to deal with the evolution of apparently altruistic acts, but the fitness benefits and costs and the degree of relatedness can be difficult to estimate. Fitness costs and benefits are often measured in fecundity. Many tests of Hamilton's rule de Lefort examine a more general prediction of kin selection. Helping behavior should be most common between close relatives, when R is relatively high, less common between distant relatives, when R is low, and rare between unrelated individuals, when R is 0. Table 18, Coefficient of Relatedness, R, for different relationship types among pairs of humans. 13.2.2 Inclusive fitness. The proportion of alleles shared by two individuals can be defined as a coefficient of relationship, R. If an individual has a certain allele, the probability that a particular relative also has that allele is R. Siblings have an R equals 1/2. An animal is likely to have virtually all its alleles still viable if it sacrifices itself for two or more siblings. In fact, natural selection should definitely favor altruism of an individual toward 3 siblings because, in a sense, natural selection is weighing one copy of an individual's alleles, the individual itself, versus 1.5 copies, 3 siblings. This sort of reasoning has been termed the calculus of the genes. It does not imply that individuals actually think these things out, rather, natural selection has favored the individuals that behave this way. Altruistic behaviors exhibited by parents toward their offspring are easily understood in terms of close genetic relatedness. Genetic relatedness extends beyond the parent-offspring relationship, allowing an individual to influence its fitness in 2 different ways. 1. It may produce its own offspring, contributing to its own individual fitness. 2. It may help relatives, who bear some of the same genes, in ways that increase their fitness. Because relatives are descended from a common ancestor, they are likely to bear some of the same alleles, Figure 119. In diploid organisms, 2 offspring of the same parents share on average 50% of the same alleles. An individual is likely to share 25% of its alleles with its siblings' offspring. Therefore, by helping its relatives, an individual can increase the representation of some of its own alleles in the population. Together, individual fitness and fitness gained through helping non-descendant kin determine the inclusive fitness of an individual. He referred to the way natural selection acts on inclusive fitness as kin selection, Figure 119. Genetic relatedness of self with different relatives. Imagine you have 5 offsprings. Through diligent parental care, survive to reproduce. You give your life in a heroic deed to save a total of 4 of your nieces and nephews and 8 cousins. What is your inclusive fitness? To answer this question, first you must know genetic relatedness. I.e. parent offspring 0.5, uncle nephew / niece 0.25 and cousin equals 0.125. Inclusive fitness for offsprings plus 4 niece / nephew plus 8 cousins plus you died. 4 times 0.5 plus 4x 0.25 plus 8x 0.125 plus 0 equals 4. Your individual fitness is 1 and your inclusive fitness is 4. So although you gave your life, but then also you are able to transfer 4 times more alleles to next generation, and if you would survived, your total inclusive fitness would have been 5. Occasional altruistic acts may eventually evolve into altruistic behavior patterns if the benefits of increasing the reproductive success of relatives exceed the costs of decreasing the altruist's own reproductive success. For example, an individual A can derive fitness benefit of 200 units by helping individual B, but incurs a fitness cost of 75 units in doing so. Following Hamilton's rule, A should help B only if B is his brother or sister or mother or father, genetic relatedness 0.5. Since only in this scenario cost is lesser than the product of genetic relatedness and benefits. CRXB 75 less than 200x 0.5. 75 less than 100. 13.2.3 Kin discrimination. Hamilton's rule tacitly assumes that individuals can discriminate kin from non-kin so that altruistic behaviors can benefit relatives. Numerous studies show that individuals, when given a choice, prefer to associate with kin over non-kin in a non-mating context but display the opposite preference when seeking mates. 2 mechanisms are thought to provide important explanations for kin discrimination ability, and both involve learning. 1. Direct familiarization. It is the ability of individuals to discriminate kin from non-kin through previous associations. In many species, siblings are raised together in a nest or remain close to their parents for an extended period and so have the opportunity to learn the phenotypes of their close relatives, both their parents and their siblings. For example, sticklebacks become familiar with other individuals at an early age based on prior association with them. 2. Indirect familiarization. The discrimination of kin from non-kin via phenotype matching. In this process, individuals learn a reference phenotypic cue from themselves or a known close relative, like a parent. One such cue might be a chemical odor profile. Once learned, an individual then assesses the degree of similarity of the learned cue to that cue in others. More closely related individuals should have a higher degree of similarity in the cue. Kin discrimination in insects such as cockroach is thought to involve assessment of chemicals found on an individual's body surface or cuticle. One diverse class of compounds that may play a role in individual discrimination is cuticular hydrocarbons, CHCs. These hydrocarbons range in chain length from 1 to several dozen carbon atoms, and the number and relative proportion of different cuticular hydrocarbons present, known as a CHC profile, can vary greatly among individuals in a population. Many social groups consist of some individuals that are close relatives and others that are unrelated or distantly related. Individuals of some species recognize their relatives and adjust their behavior accordingly. 3.2.4 Examples of kin selection. Example 1. White-fronted bee-eaters are African birds that nest colonially. Most breeding pairs are assisted by non-breeding adults that help incubate eggs and feed nestlings. Nearly all of these helpers assist close relatives, figure 120. When helpers have a choice of 2 nests at which to help, about 95% of the time they choose the nest with the young more closely related to them. Several other pieces of evidence suggest that the helping behavior of white-fronted bee-eaters evolved through kin selection. 1. Both males and females help to care for nestlings, but males help more often than females. Males remain in the social group in which they were born, but females join other social groups when they mature. Therefore, females typically live in social groups composed primarily of non-relatives. 2. Individual bee-eaters do not appear to gain anything in addition to inclusive fitness by helping. Helpers do not gain experience that improves their performances when they become breeders. 3. Nests with helpers produce more fledglings than do nests without helpers, showing that helpers do increase the number of fledglings produced by their close relatives. Notice that all these patterns are consistent with the principle that bee-eaters behave in ways that improve their individual fitness, not in ways that benefit the species. Figure 120, kin selection in white-fronted bee-eaters. Example 2, alarm-calling behavior in Belding's ground squirrels, Spermophilus beldingi. These rodents live in high-density populations and interact frequently in subalpine meadows in western North America. Adult males and females live in very different social environments. Females tend to be surrounded by female relatives, because juvenile females disperse very short distances from their natal burrow. In contrast, males tend to be surrounded by unrelated squirrels, because juvenile males disperse more than 250 m from their natal burrow, and adult males move an additional 150 m away from the burrow of their mate when the offspring are born. Ground squirrels are attacked by a variety of predators and produce specific vocalizations, or alarm calls, in response to predators such as long-tailed weasels, Mustela frenata, and badgers, Taxidea taxus. Alarm calls benefit others, which when they hear them will typically run to the nearest burrow or scan the environment, behaviors that reduce their risk of predation. Alarm calls also entail a risk. Producing a vocalization can attract a predator to the caller. Sherman studied one population over 3 years. He found that adult females were significantly more likely to give the first alarm call than were adult males or juveniles, figure 121. In fact, adult males rarely gave the first alarm call when a predator was present. Sherman also noted that individuals paid a fitness cost of calling. Significantly more calling squirrels were hunted by predators than were non-callers, and more callers were killed, figure 121, ground squirrel alarm calls. Observed, dark, and expected, light, number of first alarm calls given based on the numbers of different individuals in each age class in the population. Sherman concluded that kin selection can explain the observed variation in alarm calling behavior because adult females, and not males, are surrounded by close relatives. If alarm calls help increase the survival of close relatives, this behavior could provide genetic benefits to the female callers. Alarm calls are costly to produce because individuals who give them suffer higher predation risk than non-callers, and so adult males, who are not surrounded by close relatives, rarely produce these calls. This results demonstrate that kin selection can explain variation in helping behavior when animals face predation risk. Example 3, altruism in turkeys. Turkeys, Meleagris gallopavo, are large birds, over 1 m in length, live in open fields and woodlands throughout much of North America. Turkeys often form male display partnerships in which a pair of males, called a coalition, displays together to court and defend females against other males. However, only one of the two males in a coalition, the dominant one, mates. Why does the subordinate male display with another male when this leads to no direct reproductive fitness benefit? One possibility is that males are closely related and the subordinate individual obtains indirect fitness benefits. Via kin selection, Krakauer tested this idea. He captured and uniquely marked turkey with colored wing tags and collected blood samples to conduct DNA analysis. Turkeys were located regularly to observe courtship behavior and associations among males. Coalitions were defined as pairs of males within 2 m of each other that displayed at least twice to a female. The dominant male was identified as the turkey that performed the most complete mating display, strutting. Solitary males, on the other hand, were those adults that did not meet these criteria and were observed displaying alone to a female at least twice. The combination of behavioral observations and genetic data allowed Krakauer to calculate all 3 parameters in Hamilton's rule, R, B, and C. He determined that coalitions were composed of very close relatives. The mean degree of relatedness, R, between individuals was 0.42, slightly below the value for full brothers, 0.50, but significantly higher than the value for any 2 random males in the population. Krakauer found that in coalitions, subordinate males fathered no offspring, but a dominant male fathered, on average, 7.0 offspring. In contrast, solo males, who was not in coalitions, sired, on average, only 0.9 offspring. We can now plug these results into Hamilton's rule. First, the additional fitness benefit, B, that the dominant obtained from the cooperation it received from a subordinate was 7.00.9, or 6.1 offspring per male. The fitness cost of helping, C, was 0.9, the number of offspring that the subordinate could achieve as a solo male. Finally, the average relatedness, R, between coalition members was 0.42. In sum, BXR 6.1 times 0.42 2.5 60.9 equals C. Hamilton's rule is satisfied for subordinate males. BXR is in fact greater than C, and the fitness of altruistic subordinates is higher than the fitness of non-altruistic solo males. 13.2.5 Reproductive skewness in kin selection. In many species, individuals in groups cooperatively raise offspring. In such groups, there can be tremendous variation in the relative reproductive success of adults, measured as reproductive skew. In groups with low reproductive skew, all adults produce similar numbers of offspring. However, many groups exhibit high reproductive skew because breeding is restricted to a few adults, often just a single pair, and all other adults defend group resources and care for the offspring. We can explain the evolution of such kin selection in groups with high reproductive skew by cooperative breeding, habitat saturation, social cueing or eusociability. 1. Cooperative breeding, in hundreds of species of birds, mammals, and fish, individuals spend time and effort caring for the offspring of others, a phenomenon known as cooperative breeding. These helpers do not breed themselves but instead provide parental care in the form of incubation, food provision, territorial defense, and anti-predator behavior. Helpers are clearly exhibiting altruistic behavior. They pay the energetic costs associated with parental care, sacrifice the chance to breed themselves, and enhance the fitness of others. Two important factors explain the evolution of non-reproductive helpers. 1. In many species, helpers are closely related to the breeding pair. Often, they are older offspring of that pair. As such, they are helping relatives and so accrue indirect fitness benefits via kin selection. 2. A second factor that can explain this care behavior is the existence of ecological constraints. Attempting to breed can entail considerable risk based on environmental conditions. For instance, there may be a lack of available breeding sites or very high predation risk when searching for a suitable breeding site. If few breeding sites are available in the environment, or if it is risky to leave a group in order to attempt to breed, it might be more beneficial for an individual to help a breeding pair raise their offspring. 2. Habitat saturation. The habitat saturation hypothesis asserts that when few territories are available, a breeding attempt has a low probability of success and likely entails a very high cost in terms of reduced survivorship. Individuals can have higher fitness by staying in an established group to gain the associated fitness benefits of sociality and can also obtain indirect fitness benefits by helping to raise siblings. In essence, these individuals are waiting for a better opportunity to breed in the future if territories become available. Habitat saturation and helping behavior has been observed in Seychelles warblers. 3. Social cueing. In many permanent groups, individuals exhibit a dominance hierarchy. Subordinates do not breed but instead help in defending the group's territory. Over time, subordinates can move up the social ladder as they age and as higher-ranking individuals suffer mortality, a process called social cueing. Social cueing provides a delayed direct benefit of helping, because subordinates can eventually inherit a territory and its breeding opportunities. Clownfish, Amphiprion percula, live in small groups that consist of a breeding pair and up to 4 unrelated non-breeders. Adults are protandrous. On maturation, they develop into males but later can develop into females. Within each group, there is a size-based dominance hierarchy in which the breeding female is the largest and most dominant fish, followed by the breeding male and then any non-breeders. Non-breeders do not have functioning gonads and so obtain no immediate reproductive benefits from the group, but they often help defend the territory. Buston predicted that subordinates may obtain future reproductive benefits through social cueing. Loss of the breeding female always led to a chain reaction. The breeding male changed sex and became the dominant breeding female, and the next highest-ranking non-breeder in the group became a sexually mature male. Buston concluded that non-breeding group members benefit from group membership by eventually inheriting the territory and thus obtaining reproductive success. 4. Eusociality. Cooperative breeding also occurs in many invertebrates, often in a nest, hive, or colony. Some cooperatively breeding insects, such as paper wasps, are similar to cooperatively breeding vertebrates because all adults are physiologically capable of reproducing, but some forego reproduction either to help raise close relatives or to wait in a social queue for a breeding opportunity to arise. But in other species, we see a new phenomenon, the evolution of castes, groups of individuals that engage in distinct behaviors. Castes are morphologically and behaviorally distinct individuals within a social group. Different castes have different tasks: large-bodied soldiers with enlarged forelegs or mandibles, and perhaps even glands that eject toxic chemicals for nest protection, small-bodied workers that tend the nest, feed the young, and search for food, and the very large queen that produces offspring. In many species, workers and soldiers are sterile. They are physiologically incapable of reproduction. They spend their lives maintaining and defending the nest and helping the queen reproduce. Such species whose social groups include sterile individuals are said to be eusocial. This extreme form of social behavior has evolved in termites and many hymenopterans, ants, bees, and wasps. In these species, most females are workers that forage for the colony and/or defend it against predators, but do not reproduce. Workers may include soldiers with large, specialized defensive weapons, which may be killed while defending the colony. Only a few females, known as queens, are fertile, and they produce all the offspring of the colony. Both genetic and environmental factors facilitate the evolution of eusociality. W.D. Hamilton first suggested that eusociality evolved among the Hymenoptera because its members have an unusual sex determination system in which males are haploid but females are diploid, haploidy, diploidy. Figure 122. Figure 122, haplodiploidy system among the Hymenoptera, a fertilized, diploid, egg hatches into a female, an unfertilized, haploid, egg hatches into a male. If a female copulates with only one male, all the sperm she receives are identical because a haploid male has only one set of chromosomes, all of which are transmitted to every sperm cell. Therefore, a female's daughters share all of their father's genes. They also share, on average, half of the genes they receive from their mother. As a result, they share 75% of their alleles on average, rather than the 50% they would share if both parents were diploid. Since workers are more genetically similar to their sisters than they would be to their own offspring, they can increase their fitness more by caring for their sisters than by producing and caring for their own offspring. Genetic relatedness is highest in social insect groups when queens are monandrous, that is, when they have a single mate. When females are polyandrous, the average genetic relatedness in groups goes down as low as 25%, as not all individuals in a group share the same father. So ethologists have predicted that eusociality in bees should often be associated with a monogamous mating system. Figure 123. Figure 123, decrease in genetic relatedness among progeny as number of male parent increases. Conditions favoring eusociality. Eusociality may also be favored if establishment of new colonies is difficult and dangerous. Nearly all eusocial animals construct elaborate nests or burrow systems within which their offspring are reared. Naked mole rats, the most eusocial mammals, live in underground colonies containing 70 to 80 individuals. The colony's tunnel systems are maintained by sterile workers. Breeding is restricted to a single queen and several kings that live in a nest chamber in the center of the colony. Individuals attempting to found new colonies are at high risk of being captured by predators, and most founding events fail. Thus, high predation rates, which favor cooperation among founding individuals, may facilitate the evolution of eusociality. 13.3 Reciprocal altruism. Kin selection cannot explain the evolution of cooperation among unrelated individuals. The coefficient of relatedness between such individuals is zero, and so Hamilton's rule predicts that kin selection will not favor the evolution of altruism. How, then, can we explain cooperation among non-relatives? Robert Trivers, 1971, tackled the evolution of cooperation between unrelated individuals in an important paper entitled The Evolution of Reciprocal Altruism. Trivers argued that if individuals benefited from exchanging acts of cooperative and altruistic behavior, then this sort of reciprocal exchange system might be favored by natural selection. That is, if individual A pays some cost to help individual B, but this cost is made up for at some point in the future, when B helps A, then natural selection might favor behaviors that lead to this type of reciprocity. If the benefit received from helping exceeds the cost of helping, individuals that help will obtain higher fitness than non-helpers through the repeated interaction, and so cooperation can spread in a population. Trivers also recognized that reciprocal altruism is subject to cheating. An individual that receives help but then does not reciprocate will obtain a fitness benefit but pay no cost. This temptation to cheat can prevent the evolution of helping. So how cheating is avoided so that cooperation can evolve? Robert Axelrod and William Hamilton proposed one solution called the tit-for-tat strategy, a form of reciprocal altruist. Here, a player always cooperates the first time it interacts with a new opponent. In all subsequent interactions with that opponent, it simply matches the behavior of that individual from the previous interaction. When two players use this strategy, they always cooperate on the first encounter, and all subsequent encounters, and so achieve the highest fitness. If a player using tit-for-tat interacts with a betrayer, the player does not cooperate with that individual on all subsequent interactions. If tit-for-tat is common, another strategy cannot take hold in the population. 13.3.1 Conditions necessary for reciprocal altruism. 1. The behavior must reduce a donor's fitness relative to a selfish alternative, and the fitness of the recipient must be elevated relative to non-recipients. 2. The performance of the behavior must not depend on the receipt of an immediate benefit. 3. A mechanism for detecting cheaters must exist. 4. A large, indefinite, number of opportunities to exchange aid must exist. The first condition is necessary for altruism as such, while the second is distinguishing reciprocal altruism from simple mutualism. Conditions 1 and 2 must apply to both individuals engaging in reciprocal helping. The third condition makes the interaction reciprocal. Condition number 4 is required, as otherwise non-altruists may always exploit altruistic behavior without any consequences, and therefore evolution of reciprocal altruism would not be possible. 13.3.2 Example of reciprocal altruism. Example 1, Food sharing in vampire bats. One of the first studies of reciprocal food sharing behavior was done in vampire bats, Desmodus rotundus. A group of vampire bats is composed largely of females, with a low average coefficient of relatedness, between 0.02 and 0.11. Females in a nest of vampire bats sometimes regurgitate blood meals to other bats that have failed to obtain food in the recent past. This sort of food sharing can literally be a matter of life or death, as individuals may starve to death if they don't receive a blood meal approximately every 60 hours. Wilkinson found 3 lines of evidence that reciprocity per se may be important in sharing blood meals in vampire bats. 1. The probability of future interaction between group members in a nest of vampire bats is high as required by tit-for-tat models. 2. Blood meals provide a huge, potentially life-saving benefit for recipients, while the cost of giving up some blood may not be as great to the donor. And 3. Example 2. Allogrooming in Japanese macaques. Many animals groom, or clean, themselves in an attempt to remove external parasites. This sort of grooming might involve scratching an area of skin or licking it. Social grooming, or allogrooming, in which one individual grooms another, is one of the most obvious and frequently observed cooperative behaviors recorded by primatologists. Japanese macaques, Macaca fuscata, live in large social groups. Two altruistic behaviors occur between adult females. First, macaques frequently exhibit allogrooming. Second, when agonistic interactions occur between group members, adult females will occasionally intervene and provide support for one of the animals. Their support benefits the recipient, which tends not to become injured or lose the encounter. However, such support also takes time, energy, and a risk of injury on the part of the altruistic supporter. Research found that an individual's helping behavior was not correlated with the level of relatedness between individuals, and therefore kin selection could not provide an explanation. Instead, females most often chose to groom others based on the level of grooming they had received from that individual in the past. In addition, females that had received support during an aggressive encounter were more likely to groom the supporting individual. Similarly, individual females chose to support others that had supported them in the past and from whom they had received grooming. Reciprocal altruism seems to be the best explanation for allogrooming and agonistic support in this case. Example 3, tit-for-tat in red-winged blackbirds. Red-winged blackbirds, Agellius phoeniceus, nest in dense aggregations in vegetation that grows at the edge of ponds. Males defend territories and often breed in the same territory for successive years. This behavior allows neighboring males to live side by side for multiple years, which provides the opportunity for repeated interactions. Crows are common nest predators of blackbirds. When they approach a nesting site, neighboring red-winged blackbirds often engage in cooperative nest defense in the form of mobbing to drive them away. Researcher has experimentally identified that male red-winged blackbirds assess the level of cooperation of their neighbor and adjust their level of nest defense accordingly, as described by the tit-for-tat strategy. When both birds engage a predator, cooperative nest defense behavior is high. However, when one partner betrays the other and falls to defend the territory, its neighbor immediately reduces its level of defense, and this reduction lasts through a second interaction the following day. 13.3.3 Indirect reciprocity. Indirect reciprocity is a relationship in which helping individuals are more likely to receive help in the future because they have obtained high image scores by helping others. Image score is an assessment of an individual's propensity for helping others based on its observed prior behavior. Reciprocal altruism can explain the evolution of cooperation in some species, but due to temptation to cheat, direct reciprocal altruism has rarely been observed in nature. However, Martin Nowak and Carl Sigmund suggested that altruism among unrelated individuals can also evolve through indirect reciprocity, in which individual A helps individual B because A observed B helping a third individual in the past. For indirect reciprocity to emerge, it is crucial that individuals know something about the past helping behavior of other individuals. They must also keep track of others' propensity to help, known as their image score or reputation for helping. If A knows that B has helped others frequently in the past, then A will have a high image score for B. Reciprocity spreads through the population indirectly, because helping individuals are more likely to receive help in the future. Example, reputations and cleaner fish. Cleaner fish feed on ectoparasites on client fish bodies. However, they actually prefer to feed on client tissue, such as their mucus, because it is high in calories and nutrients. Client fish approach cleaners to solicit an interaction, and so when cleaners interact with a client, they can cooperate by feeding on ectoparasites or cheat by feeding on mucus. When a cleaner cheats, clients shake their body as if jolted and then typically chase away the cleaner. Other potential clients can observe these interactions. Experimental results indicate that client fish can learn about altruistic tendencies by observing cleaners' behavior to form image scores, which then affect the client fish's subsequent behavior. 13.4 Byproduct mutualism. Another type of social cooperation is via byproduct mutualism. Cooperation here is a byproduct of the fact that an individual would incur an immediate cost or penalty if it did not act cooperatively, such that the immediate net benefit of cooperating outweighs that of cheating. In other words, there would be no temptation to cheat, so individuals would cooperate. Mathematical models predict that byproduct mutualism is more likely to evolve in harsh versus mild environments. Byproduct mutualism differs from reciprocity in two ways. First, there is no temptation to cheat under byproduct mutualism, whereas such a temptation always exists in systems involving reciprocity. In addition, while most, but not all, forms of reciprocity require some form of scorekeeping, with byproduct mutualism individuals need not keep track of the past behavior of partners because in such situations it is always in the best interest of all parties to cooperate, and so past behavior is not relevant in this decision-making process. Example: house sparrows, Passer domesticus, produce a unique chirrup call when they find a food resource. These calls appear to attract other birds to a newly discovered food source, and may involve cooperative signaling. To examine just what type of cooperation, researcher tested whether the chirrup vocalization did in fact bring conspecifics to a newly discovered food source, and if so, under what conditions. To do so, he recorded chirrup calls at artificial feeders containing bread that was either divisible among sparrows or that was just enough food for a single bird, figure 124. It was observed that those sparrows arriving at a patch of food first, labeled as pioneers, were the most likely to produce chirrup calls. Furthermore, chirrup call rates were higher when the food resource was divisible, figure 124, food size and food calls in sparrows. A. The first bird to arrive at a food patch, labeled the pioneer, were more likely to give chirrup calls that attracted other birds when resources were more divisible. B. Pioneers also called more often when food was easily divisible. If the food items were small enough that sparrows could pick them up and fly away, they would do so without producing chirrup calls. Chirrup calls were, however, associated with larger food items, that is, those that were too big to remove from the experimental area. It may be that given that sparrows needed to remain at a feeder with large food items, and that it is safer to do so in the company of other sparrows, the benefits associated with predator detection outweighed the costs of inviting other foragers to share food at the site. In that case, chirrup calls would be an example of byproduct mutualism. They are emitted when the immediate net benefit for calling, predator detection and some food, is greater than the net benefit for not calling, more to eat. 13.5 Benefits of social behavior. Social animals can achieve great abundances. For example, up to 94% of the individuals and 86% of the biomass of arthropods in the canopies, treetops, of tropical rainforests are social ants. Termites, also social insects, are the primary consumers of plant tissues in the savannas of Africa. They live in and build large mounds, within which many other species of animals live. Termites may extract nutrients from the soil at depths as great as 80 meters. In parts of Australia, termite density may reach 1,000 colonies per hectare. Ants and termites have achieved these remarkable abundances in part because their social organization allows them to exploit the services of other organisms in harvesting vital resources. The most abundant and highly productive ants and termites actively cultivate fungi that break down difficult-to-digest plant tissues, including wood. Some ants tend aphids and other insects that tap phloem fluids, protecting the phloem suckers from predators. Because phloem is rich in carbohydrates but poor in proteins, phloem suckers ingest more carbohydrates than they can use. They eject the excess in the form of sugar-rich anal drops, which the ants eat. Because the ants can easily obtain enough carbohydrates in this manner, they need to get only proteins in other ways, such as by eating other insects. Moreover, with their high, sugar-based metabolic rates, the ants can expend the energy needed to drive other predatory insects away from their food sources. In this way, Ants strongly influence the community of insects in tropical forest canopies. Social living also enables organisms to find and use temporally and spatially patchy foods. The wildebeest, which travels in large herds, is the most abundant large mammal in Africa. More than 1 million individuals are found in the herd that migrates between the Masai Mara in Kenya and the Serengeti in Tanzania to feed on the rapidly growing grass that follows seasonal rains in each area. Even more striking is the abundance achieved by our own species. Social living enabled members of human groups to specialize in different activities. Among the benefits of specialization were domestication of plants and animals and cultivation of land. These innovations enabled our ancestors to increase the resources at their disposal dramatically. Those increases, in turn, stimulated rapid population growth up to the limit determined by the agricultural productivity that was possible with human and animal-powered tools.